Hi friends, my name is Sunil Sharma and you are watching YouTube channel CareersTalk. Today's video going to be very informative as I am going to share my real interview experience with Visa along with questions which was asked to me. Friends, at the end of the video, if you like my efforts, please give me your blessings in the form of likes. Your one like will be big motivation for me. Also, don't forget to subscribe and press bell icon as I am going to post few other real life interview questions from other companies. So without wasting time, let's get started. Friends, let's discuss about the interview rounds. So there are altogether 5 rounds of interview and it will take 6 to 8 weeks. So be little patient. First round and second round which I have faced are telephonic. My first round is from USA and second round is from Bangalore, India. Third round and fourth round are videocon through WebEx. Third round is being conducted by Agile Center of Excellence Practice Head and fourth round is being done by Senior Director. I can say with my experience that clearing these rounds are not that hard, but getting the interview call from Visa is very difficult. But I will share how you can get a call from Visa in upcoming video. The first question is about as a Scrum Master, what is your responsibilities? So I mentioned few responsibilities for a Scrum Master. It's up to you. You want to change, you want to elaborate more, but take around 4 to 5 minutes and explain about your key responsibilities. So I mentioned as a Scrum Master, I am organizing and facilitating different project planning, daily stand-up meetings, reviews, retrospective, altogether different Scrum ceremonies. Second thing which I mentioned is about removing impediments. Whenever you are going to explain about impediments, they're definitely going to ask, tell us the recent impediments which you have faced in your project and how you have cleared it. So whenever you are telling them something, be little careful because most of the time they ask for real life experience. So I gave them a small example that one of my senior team member is getting constant calls from my practice head to conduct few interviews. So most of his time in a week he is taking 4 to 5 interviews for his practice. But then it is taking his capacity. And then he came to me that most of his time is going into conducting different interviews, sorting all those resumes and all. So I go to the practice head and ask him that this senior folk is already busy in important delivery and why don't you create a pool of interviewers so that you can have multiple interviewers at a time. So they like my suggestion and in this way I have removed the impediments both for my team member and for my practice. So give them some real life example whenever you are telling them. Third thing which I mentioned is about the product owner. So as a Scrum Master, you should closely work with product owner. Both should work hand in synergy to make your team a success. Next thing I mentioned about the matrices. So you should give them some examples what kind of different matrices you are using in your project. That can be anything. It's like velocity, burnout chart, release chart, or it can be anything. It's important for different stakeholders to know your project progress. So you can keep feeding them different kind of matrices to different stakeholders. It can be your internal management or clients. So it's up to you how you will take this question. It's a very generic one, but very important to start with. Let's move on to the next question. There is one pattern which I have observed during all the interviews that they will always ask you some very basic question, but then they will ask couple of successive questions. So for example, they ask me what is DOD, definition of done. But then they also ask me when DOD is being created and will it unchange until product release, how DOD is different from acceptance criteria. So you can see it's multiple different kind of questions they have asked in one question. So I have given answer something like that. That definition of done is a criteria or a set of rules or a different kind of checklist of activities that are applicable to all user stories in a given sprint. That's the key thing, that these checklists of activities that are applicable to all the user stories in a given sprint. So for example, coding comments, unit test cases, peer reviews, release note, user documentation. Something that can be verified and demonstrated value to a project. DoD is created during the very first sprint. So that's the key thing which you should mention, that DoD is created during the very first thing. But the catch over here is the next question, that will it unchanged until product release? And the answer is no. During sprint retrospective, the Scrum team can decide to change the DoD to bring value to the end product. So, in between, if team feel that there is a need to change the definition of done, so in association with product owner, they can change DoD. Next thing they ask about acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are unique for individual user stories, and the focus is on the condition that must be met for a user story to be approved by the product owner. This question I have also seen in couple of other interviews where they ask about how this DoD is different from acceptance criteria. So I think it's a good question. You should prepare it well. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is on sprint review. So what's the importance of sprint review? Who all are participates in that, and who gives the demo? So sprint review is meant to be the official movement during every sprint in which Scrum team shows the product made to the stakeholders. The stakeholders give their feedback regarding the product that has been demonstrated. By getting feedback on delivery as quick as possible, the Scrum team quickly knows whether they are on the right track. I have also mentioned about at the beginning of the meeting, the product owner explained which items selected by the dev team have been completed and which have not. After the demonstration of the delivered product by the development team, with the associated feedback from the stakeholders, the product owner discussed the product backlog in order to include the stakeholders in the future steps toward the completion of the project. You can also mention about dev team during the sprint review. So during the sprint review, the dev team discussed how they did the work, what problems did they have experienced, how did they solve the challenges, issues which they encounter, what choices, decisions have been made. The purpose of this is to provide the stakeholders with insight into the activities and the choices made. Subsequently, the delivery is demonstrated and the questions are answered. This is about actually showing the results so that the stakeholder have a good idea of the direction in which the work is moving. So the idea is to show them some kind of end result. For example, if this is about creating some reports, so you have to actually show that report. If it's about creating some kind of UX design, you should actually show demo that particular design to the stakeholders. So second answer, who all are participate in that? So it's up to PO. If PO wants, he can invite the different stakeholders to that meeting. Sometimes we have dependency on other teams as well. So it's a PO who can ask other team members to join that because there are dependencies. So basically it's PO who will decide that who can be participate in the sprint review. The third question is about who gives the demo. Now I have seen in practical scenario, sometimes some of the team they will send their QA only to give the demo, but that's not the right thing. Sometimes the team will nominate a member to present the demo, and sometimes the tasks are going to be shared with individuals demonstrating the actual part of the increment they worked on. So in Agile, as you all know, there is nothing called a tester or a developer. We all consider as a dev team. So the right answer is it's a dev team who is going to give the demo. Let's move on to the next question. Is on product backlog. I was surprised to get this question because that is more from a PO perspective. But still, I have gave them the answer. So the question is, what is product backlog? Who is allowed to change the product backlog? See, the second question is again a tricky one. So I told them a product backlog is prioritized feature list containing short description of all functionality desired in the product, with the business value for each features clearly quantified along with the source of the feature request. If you see, here I have mentioned about the inputs which can be gone in making the product backlog. So you can see the product vision, the product roadmap, the MVP, the minimum viable product, different stakeholders. So it can be marketing, your end users, your different buyers. They all can give some kind of requirements that can be converted into product backlog. And of course, the last is the dev team, the team who actually working. They can also provide their suggestions to improve the product backlog. I have also mentioned about what does a good product backlog looks like. So a good product backlog is characterized by 4 elements, that is deep. A good product backlog is always a detailed one. So a good product backlog has enough backlog items to fill at least one sprint and preferably 2 sprints. Lower priority user stories may have less details, but items that are about to be picked up should be sprint ready. By sprint ready, we mean that the development team understand them, the items are small, and the acceptance criteria and DoD be clear. Then, a good product backlog should be emergent, evolves gradually. So, a product backlog is gradually discovered during the project. So, we do not strive for a complete product backlog before we start with the first sprint. Third thing is about estimated. So a user story have been estimated. So you might have encountered different estimation technique, for example, planning poker and all. So with the help of this technique, you can estimate your user stories. And the third one is prioritized. So user stories on the product backlog prioritized by the product owner. And there are different prioritization technique, but the most common ones are WSJF, that is weighted shortest job first, and then MOSCO. It's about must have, should have, could have, won't have. And the question which they have asked, so the product owner is the sole person responsible for the product backlog, but PO can delegate some of the work to the dev team. So the dev team can also change the product backlog, but with the permission of the product owner. In some of the cases, I have seen some of that spike or tech user stories created by the team. Once they have created, they will show to the PO and then PO will give the go ahead. So the answer is PO is the sole person, but then dev team can also change the product backlog. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is on sprint goal. What is the importance of sprint goal and who is responsible to create one? Again, the second question is a trick one. So, a sprint goal provides a reason and a context behind why and what the dev team are doing this sprint. It can help them to think when selecting user stories to work on for the sprint and provide some real focus. During our sprint planning, the very first phase, during initial part of the sprint planning meeting, PO explained the priority user stories within the prioritized product backlog to the Scrum team. So the Scrum team together with the PO then defined the sprint goal. And then during the second half of planning meeting, the Scrum team decide how to complete the chosen prioritized product backlog item to satisfy the sprint goal. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is on sprint retrospective. What's the purpose of sprint retrospective and how, as a Scrum Master, you conduct sprint retrospective? Can you explain different techniques which you have used with your team? So the retrospective is an excellent chance to inspect and adapt the way of working. The sprint retrospective is a soapbox for people to talk about what's working well, what's not working well, and in some cases, what is confusing. It serves as a time to pause in the development sprint cycle and reflect on how things went and learn from them. This meeting helps identify steps for specific improvements. This is about retrospective. Now, in retrospective, what is not for? So the retrospective is not for any technical deep dive sessions. It's not for planning, because for planning we already have a different ceremonies. It's not for complaining. It's not about blame and judgment. So as a Scrum Master, what do you do before the retrospective? So as a Scrum Master, you should set up retrospective collaboration tools like Miro or whatever which you guys are using. Make sure the velocity metrics are up to date, because this is a good starting point. And what, as a Scrum Master, you will do during the retrospective? As a Scrum Master, you should state what meeting is for, share different guidelines, keep unofficial business like who was absent, velocity reviews to a minimum of 10 minutes. Review previous action items from the last retro and determine if each is done. Ask team to write down what's been working well, what has not, what confusing. So give them some time, let's say 5 minutes, and make sure that they will jot it down all those points. Review what worked well and celebrate. Give them some kind of appreciation. Then, as a team, review what did not work well and what is confusing in order to clarify and give any additional context. But you should make sure that you have to keep it brief and clear per item. Time for action items comes later. As a team, vote in order to prioritize item. I must say, allow every team member to give 3 votes. Voting on what did not work well and what is confusing. Then you can count all those votes and identify top 3 items and isolate all those 3 items. With the team, identify actions to take to improve the items in questions, make action as specific as possible, and identify an owner. That's most important. Your all action item should have some owner. After the retrospective, whatever is the outcome is up to you. You have to email them, or you should mention in your somewhere in your wiki or in your archive notes. But make sure that maybe every alternative day you should go back and check on the action items. For the second part of the question, you can give them different retrospective ideas. I have just mentioned a couple of retrospective ideas which I have already used in my team, and there are many. But it's always good to prepare a couple of retrospective ideas. Again, this I have seen in many interviews. They will going to ask you definitely about retrospective. So I mentioned a couple of ideas. So first one is a standard one, which we all know, that what went well, what are your learnings, and what should we have done differently in future. Second is about starfish. Third one is WWW. Fourth one is calm, that is keep, add less and more. And fifth one is the candy, the M&M retrospective. In this, I have come up with different candies, and based on the color of the candies, team is going to give answer to the various questions. So just like a example, you can come up with your own retrospective ideas. Friends, as I have told you in the beginning of this video, that I am going to share a small trick which I have used to get a call from Visa, or you can use similar trick to all big companies, because by just simply applying you won't get a calls. So the very first thing which you have to do is go to their career sections, whatever the company which you are targeting, and always follow them on LinkedIn and Glassdoor. In this way, you will came to know about a specific opening. Once you know about a specific opening, go through the complete job description. If you see over here, whatever they're asking, you can mention most of the things in your role and responsibility. That will be going to be your first question. So take some cue from this particular JD and put that in your very first question when they are going to ask you about responsibility. Okay, so once you will go through with this JD, you will came to know about this particular job number or a reference ID. Please do not apply directly for this position, because thousands of people will apply for same position. So what I am doing, I will take this job reference handy and I will go to LinkedIn and I will just type over here Scrum Master Visa, and I just press enter and I will click on people, and then I will came to know that these many people, you can see there are like more than 15,000 results which I have found. So yeah, it's will a little bit of hard work which you have to do, but then try to connect with people who are already working on that particular location. So let's say you got to know that okay, this Scrum Master position is open in, let's say, in India, in Bangalore. Then try to find few people from same location. Friends, it's always good to have some referral. I'm sure you all are aware about that, but in these big companies, your resume will be lost with the thousands of other resumes which they are receiving. So it's always good to have someone who is already into the system and they can easily reach out to their TAs or their HR. So this is a small thing, but it's very effective. Try to do that. Connect with whatever these people. Try to give them some reference when you are connecting. When you are connecting, add some note like why you want to connect with them. And I have seen that most of the people are very helpful, because first of all, they will also get some kind of referral bonus if you will be selected. So it's a win-win for both of you, for the referral and for the referee. So this is a small trick which you can use if you are not using it till now. Let's move on to our next and final question for this video. So friends, the next question is on conflict. Believe me friends, if you are giving Scrum Master interview, out of 10 interviews, 9 people will going to ask you about conflict. So that conflict can be within your team, with your stakeholders, with your internal management. It can be any kind of conflict. So it's always better to prepare a conflict and come up with 2-3 different examples from your project. If you have not seen my previous video on Shell real life interviews, please go through that. I will share the link in the box, as well as you can see the card above. The point is, in that previous video also I have mentioned same thing, that this conflict on a team project is very important question, and you will definitely going to get this question if you are giving an interview for Scrum Master. So the best strategy for handling this kind of question is STAR method. It's a structured manner of responding to interview questions by discussing the specific situation, task, action, and result of the situation you are describing. I have taken one example over here. So let's start with that. So the situation and the task. So you have to briefly describe the context for the conflict, provide just enough background information for the context. So for an example, I have mentioned like team was managing the creation of a new discount fee module for online website and we were on a very tight deadline because we had to have delivered in time for a Black Friday sale. So here the date was fixed and we have to work accordingly. The UI designer, that is a shared resource that was assigned to our project, was very experienced and talented, but unfortunately he missed a deadline that was assigned to him. When I approached him about it, he was upset and angry. These bullets provide good context. It was an important and a complex project with a tight deadline, and the designer not only missed a deadline but showed anger. So this is a real conflict that could have led to a disaster if not handled properly. The next thing is approach. How you will approach this kind of conflict. So you need to talk about the key action that you took in the case of a conflict story. The focus should be on how to resolve the disagreement in a professional and a productive way. So for example, the next part is, I was taken aback by his presence, but I remained calm. So you can see there's a good quality of a Scrum Master to remain calm and composed. I acknowledged that the deadlines were tight and explained again the reasoning and the importance of having the UI design ready for the Black Friday sale. He was relaxed a little when he saw that I was not attacking him. He told me about all of his other competing projects and how overburdened he was. I asked him if there was any way that I could help him come up with a solution. Lastly, we agreed that we would help if his manager had a better understanding of how important and time consuming this project was. We decided we would speak with her together. His manager ended up assigning some of his other projects to another designer, which took some of the pressure off of him. So as a Scrum Master shows that he stayed calm under pressure, tackled the issue in hand, and was able to persuade others, the designer and his manager, to his point of view. The last thing about result. Every good interview story includes a happy ending. So always end your response with a description of the positive outcome of your action. So as an example, as a result, the designer was able to focus on the UI design and met the deadlines. He was sorry and thanked me for my help. We as a team successfully completed the project on time and received a lot of compliment from both our internal management and from client. So the other point described the resolution of the conflict, the positive effect on the relationship with the designer and the business outcome. So friends, I hope this example is very useful for you. Try to prepare your similar example on with the help of the STAR method. So guys, now we are at end of our video. If you like my effort, if you have learned something new today, please hit like, subscribe and comments, and also press bell icon. I am also going to prepare some of more interview videos, so you will get the notification if you hit the bell icon. So thank you guys.